Welcome to Scandal Water, where the tea is hot and the conversation lively.
Your hosts, Candy
and Ashley,
will discuss a peculiar story somehow related to the entertainment industry. This podcast might not change the world, but it just might satisfy your thirst for an intriguing tale.
Oh, it's that time of day. Tune in and hear what the ladies say. It's time to bend your ear when the silver screen appears. Stories about the stage and screen and everything in between. So come on and join the fun. The curtain opens in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, Ashley.
hello.
We are back for part 2
Yes.
of our series on Ruby Franke that we're calling Mayhem. Well, rather than jump right into the story, I thought I would start by sharing a little excerpt with you. This is from a Psychology Today article that identifies some of the warning signs of a bad therapist.
Oh, okay.
So I thought I would read, obviously this is not an all-inclusive list, it's just one little paragraph. I thought I would read it to you and then just ask for your general thoughts about what this seems to say about a quality therapist.
Okay.
Even the best therapists aren't perfect, and effective therapy won't always be easy or pleasant. But unfortunately, there are some therapists who are unqualified or simply bad at their job. If a therapist talks excessively about themselves or overly discloses personal information, cannot accept constructive criticism, or refuses to discuss what the process will be like and what kind of progress can reasonably be expected, they are likely not the best choice for most clients. Other warning signs include being judgmental or critical of the client's choices or lifestyle, appearing bored or distracted during sessions.
Oh, dang.
Treating the client as emotionally or intellectually inferior, or seeming easily overwhelmed or upset by information the client discloses.
Okay.
So just in general, thoughts about what that says about a...
I think that also is signs of a bad friend or person.
Well, right.
There's a few technical languages there, but yeah, I think that applies to just about anybody.
Right. What were a couple of the warning signs that spoke to you most strongly?
Oh, let's see. What's the one you said? Like, some of the stuff I don't think applies. They talk about themselves. Maybe it could help with what you're dealing with. I think if they act bored or distracted, or if they're critical of you because you're coming to them for help. So if they're criticizing you, and it's not a constructive criticism, it's not like, hey, let's talk about what this could do, but just straight up bad mouthing what you're doing and not being
right.
helpful or insulting you, that to me would be the biggest red flag. Unqualified would be another one, but then who says who's qualified? Because you could have friends who aren't therapists who can help. That's a little but yeah, I think being critical, you've come to this person for help, that would probably be my number one. And if you're just going to sit there and berate me and make me feel bad, that's not why I'm here. I'm here to get help, not be reminded of why I'm a bad person,
I think one that goes along with what you said about being critical would be that warning sign of treating the client as emotionally or intellectually inferior.
Yeah.
Because there kind of seems to be that underlying idea of this person is judging you, and they think they know what's right, or they think they know what you should be doing, and they think you're making...
Stupid.
Yes.
You're just
To
stupid.
put it bluntly.
Yeah.
I would certainly not be wanting to open up to somebody who was treating me like that.
And then pay him. You're not even
Right,
opening up to
right.
him. I could get insults for free.
Well, and to go back to your point, I agree with you. You were broadening it. You were looking at this from the perspective of anybody who's offering you some support. But if it were a therapist that you are paying,
You're paying for this.
I want you qualified with a license.
Sure,
I want to know
yeah.
that you've got training and that
Yeah.
you are actually
You've gone through the
certified to do
steps.
this. Yeah. I brought this up, of course, because as we head into part 2, we are going to be talking about Jodi Hildebrandt, who was a therapist who was brought in to help deal with this behavioral problem that Chad was exhibiting. And you know what? At the beginning of their relationship with Jodi, the Frankies thought she was the answer to their prayers. It was some big time stuff that she was doing with him. Chad told the story of his very first encounter with Jodi. He said they were doing a counseling session through a video conferencing call. Both of his parents were present, and the first question Jodi asked him was if he was ready to start living an honest and responsible and humble lifestyle.
He's like, absolutely I am. Let's get this party going.
That's exactly what he said, almost word for word. And she came back with, "You're lying, Chad."
Yeah. And on the
Yeah.
documentary, he's like, of course I'm lying, but you said it?
Right,
You
called
actually said it?
Right. And it was funny because when I was watching him say that in that interview, he sounded like he was a little bit impressed, kind of like, oh, she called me on it. Oh, I respect that. But he actually went on to say that it took him aback. He said he looked at his mom. His mom was kind of smirking, and he knew that from that moment, Ruby was hooked.
Yep.
She was excited that she had found somebody who was going to call Chad on his stuff and hopefully
validate his mother.
Right. And also hopefully be able to get him back on the right path, which meant back in control. Yeah, back in control. Yeah. And you know what? You used the word obedience. One of the quotes that I wrote down, I didn't even know where to put it, but I wrote it down because it just hit me. At one point in the docuseries, Kevin says to Ruby, love is obedience. So I thought, oh, that's so telling. So when her children are obeying, they love her. If they are not, this is a deeply felt affront to everything probably that she is.
But I don't think that's two-sided. I think it's one-sided. When does she love her children then? You know?
Right. But, you know,
when they obey her,
right.
only when they obey me do I love you. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like they love me when they obey me. I love them in return when they obey me. And when they don't obey me, I don't love them.
Right. That's a good point.
Is it a one-way street?
Is it conditional?
I think it is.
Right. Well, to get Chad under control, Jodi's advice was that they needed to take everything away from him. So he lost all his electronics, including his cell phone and Xbox. He was not allowed to have any involvement with sports. And this was an athlete.
Yeah.
So lost his sports. And almost right away, he was sent to a wilderness camp.
This is horrible.
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing is Chad was such a strong fella.
He is. You know, all of her kids are so strong.
They are. They really are.
Resilient.
And he was determined not to let her get any satisfaction. No matter what they threw at him, he would just defiantly roll with it. He wasn't going to give them anything. And we can see this because his parents, again, would continue to document things on their channel. There is a clip where we see Kevin doing most of the talking, and he is sharing that they have sent Chad away to this wilderness therapy program.
Just so bad.
Right. And they splice in little video clips showing Chad while he is at camp.
So who's filming that?
Well, I'm sure they probably had a Zoom or something.
Or
did somebody send them clips?
I wonder, I think they did have maybe a family visitation. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, how do you get footage? He's in the wilderness and you still have footage. He can't even escape the videos in the wilderness.
No privacy at all. Well, Chad commented that while his mom was doing everything she could to fix him, he never felt like she was doing it for him. It was always all about her. And because he would not get in line, then she took away his bedroom and she gave him the choice of sleeping in the living room or on a beanbag down in the basement. He chose the basement, ended up sleeping on that beanbag for about 7 months.
And this is where the tide turns.
Well, yes, but actually, first, there was a win for Ruby. When Chad still refused to get in line, despite the fact that he's sleeping in the basement, Ruby told him that she and Jodi had a military camp that they were ready to send him to in Virginia. And if one more incident, one more time, Chad, this is where you're going, and you will be there till you're 18. And he admitted this scared him so badly, he caved.
He shaped up.
He absolutely did. He said he knew he was not going to win this war. Ruby and Jodi were not going to let this go, and he did not want to go to that military camp.
Not only were they not going to let this go, I also wrote this down. He says, I realized that she was never going to let Jodi go. This is the way it's going to be.
Right.
So Jodi is now the boss of my life.
Yes.
And if I don't do what Jodi says, I'm going to end up in Virginia in the military.
But here's the thing that kept surprising me. Chad's sessions with Jodi increased to twice a week.
And he liked him.
And he did. He said for quite some time, he said it wasn't bad at all. He said she was focused on trying to get him to live a more spiritual lifestyle, which he is a devout believer himself. You know, he understands that. He said she would act kind and loving toward him when he was behaving right. They would laugh together. He's actually okay with Jodi at this point.
Yeah, he says she was very kind and considerate, and she was very understanding.
Right. Yes. But again, this is elevating Jodi in Ruby's Ruby's mind. If she was on a pedestal before, she's now like at the pinnacle of it. Ruby posted a video. We saw it. It was on her 8-passenger site, and they put a little clip of it in the docuseries. And she goes on about how she searched high and low. They, actually, Kevin and she, searched high and low for a therapist who could help her child, and nobody could do it. And then here comes Jodi and says that Jodi is literally 1 in a million. So Chad's attitude and behavior are actually incredibly better, and they decide to give him his bedroom back. It is now 2020. Chad is 15 years old. We would think we'd made it through the rough spots. But as you were alluding just a minute ago, this is actually when it all blew up. So let's hear what happened.
Ruby and I both were like, okay, I think you're ready to have the privilege back of a bedroom. That was the spark that blew the powder keg.
In our house, when we take something away, it's because they have shown that they are not responsible enough to manage it. And so we don't just turn around and give it back as soon as they start acting good.
Holy.
Have I ever given something back less than 6 months?
No. My bedroom was taken away for 7 months, and then you give it back like a couple of weeks ago.
I don't think our viewers know that.
Sleeping on a beanbag.
I've been sleeping on a beanbag since October, and they gave my room back like 2 weeks ago.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
Watching that.
I know.
If you have not seen that clip, one of the things that strikes me is how she's laughing.
Yeah, the whole family's laughing.
Yes,
Well,
they-
the kids that are there. The kids that are there are laughing, and this is just normalized to them.
Yes. Well, the backlash.
Yeah.
The backlash that came from the posting of that video. In fact, immediately people were commenting left and right, and they were saying, this is child abuse.
Yeah.
They were writing things like 8 passengers, more like 6 prisoners. I mean, it was fast and furious. There was such a furor over it on social media that people stopped subscribing. They
They
dropped
lost
them.
90% of their income overnight.
I wrote that too. They said hundreds of thousands unsubscribed, and brands immediately dropped them. 90% of their income.
I think at this point, something else, and I cannot source it. I've seen so much stuff over the last 2 years. She was no longer editing the videos herself. They had an editor. So when this happened, and it might have been in Shari's book, I don't remember.
I think it was.
It was. Okay, she talked about, like, they didn't think it was a big deal. Like, the editor chose to focus on this.
Like highlight it,
Yeah,
kind of like
this-
play it up. Like
play
here's
it up on
here's
this
an
point of the
interesting-
story.
Yeah.
And it just was the wrong thing to highlight.
Yeah. Well, the comments and the TikToks that were created around this were brutal. Kevin called it a torrent of hate and said that it was absolutely devastating to Ruby. He went on about this. For years, she had lived with this reputation, this identity of being the perfect mother. That was her dream goal. Now suddenly she was being viewed as an abusive monster. Kevin didn't really speak to this. He focused more on the impact on Ruby, but obviously people were angry at Kevin too.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
fact, according to Shari, the university where he worked received a ton of calls calling for Kevin to be fired. So people were coming at both of the parents.
Yep, at both of them. You know, I just had a weird thought. Again, just me having this thought. I wonder if the editor who had seen all of this unedited footage, and he or she, I wonder if this editor, whoever they were, was like, I wonder if I can break the story, and just kind of sneakily focused on this. You know, maybe this would show who she really was.
That's interesting. On the other hand, that
They lost their
editor-
job.
I was going to say they lost their income too, and they were probably being well paid if they
True.
were millionaires. So it wouldn't have served them well.
That's true.
Yeah. Plus, who wants to tick Ruby off?
It's very true.
But anyway, that wasn't very nice of me to say, was it?
Sorry.
But on top of all this, an online petition was started, and more than 18,000 people signed this, asking Child Protective Services to investigate the Franke family. I mean, people
It
were
was bad.
taking this very seriously. And as part of this petition, they put up a number of these videos that had been posted on 8 passengers as part of their evidence. That this is where you saw saw them bring up this example of the time Ruby said she got a text message from,
Yeah, the youngest daughter.
yes, the teacher of the youngest daughter, because that child had not packed the lunch that day. And Ruby told that teacher she wasn't going to bring the lunch. And in fact, she didn't want anybody to give her food because that child needed to go hungry in order to learn the lesson. In fact, the last little piece of the quote was, hopefully nobody gives her food and nobody steps in and gives her a lunch, because then she's not going to learn from the natural outcome. That's what Ruby said as part of this post. So they had all kinds of little video clips they were using to support their argument, and people responded. And this online petition did result in Utah's Division of Child and Family Services visiting the Franke home in June of 2020. There were also actually some 911 calls. That was another factor. But regardless, they went, they interviewed the children for a couple of hours, but according to an article that was published in Insider, the case was dropped due to lack of evidence. And Kevin said in a different interview that the caseworkers actually apologized for inflicting stress on the family because they didn't see anything. In fact, I have a quote from Kevin. He said, when they walked in unannounced, the name of the youngest daughter and Ruby were baking bread together and doing a puzzle. Hardly the evidence of an abusive home.
Right.
But the damage was done. Kevin said this several times. In terms of popularity, they were basically canceled. 8 Passengers was basically canceled. The family contacted some lawyers. They recommended Ruby apologized.
She said, nope,
over my dead body. Yes. She said she was not sorry. This was what real parenting looked like, and the world needed to see it. Ruby did continue to vlog after this incident, but Chad said he noticed she was less the fun, laughing mom, this persona that she had put out there. She now was the more serious teaching mom.
Religious teacher.
And she was not doing it nearly as often. Meanwhile, the therapist that we heard from in part 1, Brandon, the one who spent a little time working with Jodi Hildebrandt, he shared that it had not taken long for his perception of Jodi to change. First of all, because, as you said, she refused to pay him.
Well, I said that off mic, but yeah, she refused to pay him. Right. That is a red flag.
But he said he also noticed Jodi seemed very angry at men.
Yeah.
And he commented that he watched couples get torn apart again and again by her. So we're going to pause and we're going to talk a little bit more about Jodi Hildebrandt and her background. But why don't we take a break first? Hate to wait? Want part 3 right now? You can have it if you're an Apple subscriber or a member of our Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee. The entire series on the Franke family is now available ad-free on those platforms. If you're not currently a member but would like to become one, simply visit www.scandalwaterpodcast.com. And we are back.
I had a thought that I wanted to share. One thing after the cancellation is they said on the docuseries she did not care about the viewers anymore. She wanted to move on to something else. And in my commentary, I think it's because, as Kevin said, it was never about the money. She wanted that influence. So if I can't be a mom influencer, I'm going to switch and I'm going to be a religious teacher influencer. She's going to find wherever she can have that power back.
The power.
She wants the power back. Where can I get it?
Yeah. Well, she's going to get it.
She is going to get
through Jodi. Jodi's going to help with that. So let's talk about Jodi Hildebrandt. We have already identified her as a therapist, but in some of her, I don't know what you would call it, her promotional materials, let's say that she would put out, Jodi would also refer to herself as a life coach, educator, and author. A People article that was published in March says this, quote, Hildebrandt is a Utah-based therapist and the founder of Connections, a program that promised to help you flourish in your relationships, according to her now defunct website. She offered marital and parenting counseling to, quote, dispose of distortions, ugly lies in order to live in truth, connection, and freedom. But she also had a controversial past. Hildebrandt first came under fire in 2012 when her therapist's license was suspended in the state of Utah for violating patient confidentiality. At the time, she had disclosed confidential information about a patient to the Church of the Latter-day Saints of Jesus Christ.
So wrong.
and to Brigham Young University, which resulted in her patient's removal from the school and his banishment from church services.
Have you seen any interviews with that poor fella?
I have.
Oh,
and
he
he
is
tells what happened to
Yeah.
him. It was terrible. He said in a 2023 interview that Jodi had destroyed his life
Yeah.
through her, quote, super sophisticated forms of manipulation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was terrible.
And I feel so bad for him, and I feel so sad for him, because when he was first sounding the alarm, people thought he was crazy.
Yes.
He looked like the unhinged. If you see him, when he talks about it, he is so passionate that he is just like, please, someone listen to me. Please understand this was my experience. And he was being shut down left and right until this event happened. And then finally he's like, I told you,
Right.
I'm this.
Right. And there were other people who had
Yes.
who had come out too, but I think it was such a flood of followers and passionate followers that these isolated voices that were speaking out against her just absolutely were drowned
She was a guru.
out.
You said it before. She was a guru.
She was, yes. And when the Frankies became connected with Jodi, they had heard nothing about any of her past issues. Ruby, in particular, connected with Jodi because she was right in line with her strict teachings. So it wasn't long before Ruby started attending Jodi's connection classes. And Brannon, that therapist we've heard from a few times, he commented that Connections was more than a class. He said it was a community. His perspective was that Jodi used what she knew about the Mormon faith and
Yeah.
some of the members' insecurities
Yep.
to turn the group almost into a church within a church
Yeah.
with her as its prophet. Commentary from Candy, he did not use the word cult, but as I was listening to him speak, I could totally tell that's what he meant. He was alluding to the idea that she'd kind of started a cult through her Connections class.
He said she was excellent at exploiting Mormon anxiety because they want to be perfect. You know, they want to show the right way to do stuff. And then Paige, I don't know if you have this. Paige says Jodi very much became my God. She became the savior to a lot of people.
And that's, yes, a lot of people. Exactly. So many people saw her that way. And the Frankies, we're going to discover, were absolutely among that group. So even before 8 Passengers had started their downward spiral, Ruby had already started connecting to Connections classes because of the success that she'd seen with Chad.
Sure.
Like she's now
she's got firsthand knowledge of this.
she's
It
on
is
board.
successful.
Yeah, and then Ruby and her friend Paige actually pressured Kevin to give it a try too. They got him to attend a conference, and Paige commented that after attending, Kevin straight up said, "This is a cult."
Yes, he did.
But she said that she laughed because she didn't see the truth behind it at that time. She thought he was just trying to avoid going to these classes. And then Ruby found a way to pressure Kevin that could not fail. She told him she was concerned about their marriage.
Yep, which we know is his pressure point.
100%.
He wants to keep this marriage no matter what.
Absolutely. And the phrasing, there was so much terminology that was very specific to
I'm
Jodi's
going to
teachings.
invite you to do this.
Yes.
I'm like, what? I reject your invitation. That's not what they want. It's not an invitation. It's a command.
Sorry, I'm busy. I
Yeah,
have
busy. I
other
can't
plans.
go. RSVP, no.
Yes.
Declined.
But that's exactly what I had written in my notes. She wanted to invite him to join a men's connections class led by Jodi. He joined. And he realized it was actually a support group for addiction.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is, though, again, so smart. And the word manipulative was used a lot to talk about Jodi. Here's a man who has admitted he was very insecure. And when he first went into this class, Jodi would, in his perspective, pick on other men, humiliate them, but then hold Kevin up
As the ideal.
Yes, the model. He said he loved it.
I quoted it says, look at Kevin. He makes choices every day that are responsible. He stands up and he's a man.
Exactly.
That's what he needs to hear.
And Ruby starts treating him differently. Like he's seeing the impact in his marriage. He said that it seemed like Jodi's counseling could not be working any better because he and Ruby are closer than they'd been in a long time. Ruby is, everybody says this. Even Chad and Shari will say this in their clips that they give in interviews. There was less conflict.
Yeah, she stopped
Ruby
yelling.
stopped yelling at everybody. She was happier. They were happier. The family was happier. It was trickling down. More laughter, less tension.
Yeah, Kevin says the best part was my wife was looking at me the way I'd always wanted her to look at me. And then
Yes.
earlier he says that Jodi's teachings validated things that had been bugging Ruby for a long time. Ruby believed this was the roadmap back to the place we both wanted to go.
And the comments on their videos are more positive during
you
this
guys
time
look so
too.
happy. Don't
It's
listen
like-
to the haters.
Yes, everything has now turned. So they are on board 100%. And Jodi quickly, the term was elevated, the Frankies, that was the term Paige used in the docuseries, by letting Ruby train as a coach, even though Ruby did not have the time invested or the training that she should have had in the program, according to Paige's perspective. Jodi would put the Frankies on panels to answer questions during conferences or classes. And during that time, they would share incredibly personal things, according to one of the neighbors who had attended a few of those sessions. But they're being held up. They're being held up as this wonderful couple who has benefited from Jodi's life counseling and marriage counseling. Kevin said he and Ruby had started to become the face and the voice of Connections. And this is when Paige commented that it became apparent to her that the Frankies' influence meant more to Jodi than their level of knowledge or training, because they did not have the tenets down. They did not have the knowledge that they should have had to be doing what they were doing.
Hammond says, Jodi was always enamored by money and fame. I saw her treat clients differently according to their status, which you're not supposed to do.
Right. Well, and this is the point when Ruby stopped uploading videos to the 8-passenger channel altogether, and she announced she was joining Jodi's Connections podcast, and the two of them also soon began posting on social media under the title Moms of Truth. So she has given up. This is not my thing anymore. As you said, here comes my power, my influence, my validation, my affirmation through partnering with Jodi. In a clip from Jodi and Ruby's show, Ruby explains why she left her vlogging. You're going to hear Ruby speak very briefly, followed by a comment or two from Kevin. This is less than a minute long.
You wonder where I've been on my vlogs? It's to save my kids. No amount of money. I'm telling you, I was making millions. And I left it because my kids were being hurt. With entitlement, they were being hurt. With people's advice, and they didn't have a mother up the front saying, I don't care what the world's opinion is.
She believed inside that we were destined to be a part of something earth-shifting, part of God's work. We would talk about this stuff all the time. Jodi would talk about this stuff all the time. We really felt like something big was coming. It was just around the corner.
Okay, so first of all, what are your thoughts about her announcement of why she left vlogging and moved over to Connections and Jodi's work?
I noticed how she was almost like a little puppy dog when she leaned into her, first of all, when she's like, I'm Jodi's sidekick. You know, it was just like so much admiration and adulation for her. And again, the clip where she is saying that she left millions because the money never mattered to her. The money didn't matter. The influence mattered. So she's gone to where she can get more influence. That's what I think about it. I really think she didn't care about the money other than the obvious bill paying and all of that good stuff that the money would get you.
One of the things that hit me that I don't think we've said yet is we saw the humble brag again, right? But the other thing is I noticed again something that I've heard her do so many times in those clips. She would sound like she was being self-sacrificing. I left this for my children. And then she would say their entitlement, their selfishness. So many times
she points at the kids.
She would sound like she was caring about her children, but the words were always so critical. Her judgments against her children are so harsh throughout the video clips, throughout the book. And when you hear people talk about how she spoke to the children, Shari's book, or any of the sources, a lot of times if you'll see direct quotes from Ruby about her children, there will be sharp criticism in it.
It's always their fault. When he says that we thought we were going to be part of something big and earth-shattering, that's part of the narcissism, that grandiose feelings of I am so important. And I think I don't even remember, in part 1, he may have said that she always felt like she was meant to be something big.
Yeah, I actually had that written in my notes. He says several times that Ruby's faith played such a large role in everything she did. And she was always convinced that she was acting in God's will. And if something went wrong, she would look for a way to justify it. If something went right, that was validation that God was blessing her for doing what he wanted her to do. But somehow or other, she found a way for her actions to always be noble and aligned with her faith.
It was usually the kid's fault if something went wrong.
Right. You know, and following that idea, when COVID occurred with the earthquakes and a lot of social upheaval at the same time, not just Ruby, but Kevin and Jodi also were all convinced that the world was coming to an end as part of the second coming. According to Shari and Kevin, Ruby thought Jodi was inspired or chosen by God, and that God had big plans not only for Jodi, but for Ruby too, who was now aligned with her, and that this is why he had led them to this partnership. This is why he had led Ruby through her experience being canceled on the YouTube channel, but also
it was all leading to this.
Right. Now he had brought the two of them together so that they could share God's truth with the world. They use that word truth a lot, God's truth. And then a turning point occurred in May of 2021 when Jodi called Ruby hysterical and sobbing, saying that when she went to sleep at night, these hooded shadow figures would surround her bed, and she knew that it was the work of Satan, that he was attacking her because she was doing God's work and he was coming after her. The first time they got this call, they talk about this. Kevin shares that he and Ruby jumped in the car. They were going to go and try to help Jodi. I don't know.
That's not a jump in the car. That's a 4-hour jump in the car.
It's a 4-hour drive. Yes. Kevin says that while they were there were a few things that happened that he could not explain.
Yeah.
He talked about there being a big crash in the empty basement, that they went and looked. Nothing's there. Didn't know why it happened. He talked about a big handprint with elongated fingers that he saw in the glass of a window. All of this just keeps fueling their belief in what Jodi is saying. Jodi, you know, she is so concerned. Apparently she'd reached out to her bishop a few times. So he's there while
he's saying, I can't keep doing this.
He literally,
I can't keep coming over. Somebody else take over this woman.
He's blessing the house.
Yeah,
he's
I'm blessing
Jodi.
this. I'm blessing
he's
that.
He's like, I can't keep doing it. And
I've blessed it all. It's all blessed.
This is when they say, well, Ruby says, well,
Yeah.
hey, why don't you come and stay with us?
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. So Shari's about 2 weeks away from the start of college. So she honestly didn't seem that upset about having to move out of her bedroom
for
to
Jodi.
give Jodi a place to stay. She was given a couple of hours to clear all of her stuff out, and Jodi came in. Chad said at this point he thought nothing of Jodi coming to stay. He told several times of viewing Jodi as a friend and a therapist. He said he had nothing but love and respect for her.
Yeah.
But he also went on to say something significant. He pointed out that by the time Jodi came to stay in the house with them, Chad was no longer the problem child. His youngest brother and sister were now the ones who were getting in trouble all the time for disobeying Ruby and being disrespectful. Chad said his mom felt that there was some evil at work there, and she wanted help dealing with it. And guess who has just entered the house?
Oh, yeah.
So while she didn't get too upset about the loss of her room, Shari did think it was very strange to have a therapist move into...
It's real strange. That's a blurring of boundaries.
Right, yeah. So at some point, she Googled Jodi for the first time, and she found other things that concerned her. She saw negative comments saying that Jodi had destroyed some people's marriages, and also pointing out that Jodi was divorced herself and had 2 kids who weren't talking to her. So how was she qualified to be speaking into these situations where she's giving therapy to
marriage and family
right,
advice?
Exactly. That was the question they were posing. And most importantly, Shari saw that Jodi had had her license suspended. She took her concerns to her parents, but got nowhere because Jodi was so smart. Kevin points out she had prevented this. She had headed it off at the pass, you know, by telling Ruby and Kevin, oh, you know what? If you Google me, you're going to see some bad stuff because I had this one terrible,
nasty
hateful,
client.
client who badmouthed me and put these things on there. And they all believed, Chad included, that Jodi was this deity, this chosen by God person who kept being attacked by these evil forces who were trying to stop her from doing the good work.
And you got to think, at this point in Shari's book, Shari feels like she's shouting into the void. Just like, come on.
Right.
But even Shari ends up being turned.
Yeah, for a time.
For a time.
Yeah,
even she's like, okay, maybe she is. So that just shows you how good this woman is at manipulation.
Right, exactly. And... Jodi brought more than manipulation. She brought a lot of stress and drama into their house.
Yeah.
One thing that we saw in the documentary that I found very disturbing was a video clip of Jodi as she was suffering through one of the many spells that Kevin referred to as possessed trances. she would speak in other voices. She would say these cryptic things. She would try to hit herself. It was really disturbing to watch, but you could see in the video, the one they showed us, Ruby sitting there right beside
Comforting
Jodi.
her.
Yes, holding her hands back when she tried to hit herself. You could see.
There was care.
Yeah, Ruby is in this 100% alongside her.
One random YouTube commenter, and again, don't know what video, said, so how come Jodi gets love and care when she's going through something, but when Ruby's children are going through something, they get yelled at and disciplined?
Well, again, Kevin is 100% in this alongside Ruby in terms of believing that these are attacks. These are the forces of evil working against Jodi because she's this person that's so important, doing God's work on God's mission. So Kevin tried to perform exorcisms, and he said they would have very dramatic results, responses to that. They're all very convinced. This went on for weeks. The problem persisted. So now Ruby starts going up at night to check on Jodi because that's when it appears to be the worst. And then after a while, Ruby says that she needs to stay in the room all night in hopes that her presence would keep the evil spirits away. And before long, this became the new norm. Ruby was sleeping in the room with Jodi every night. Shari wrote, I felt helpless watching all this unfold. Dad, who seemed like a shell of his former self, wasn't doing anything to stop it either. I wanted to intervene, to shake him out of his compliance, but I didn't know how. I yearned for my dad to find his backbone, to step up and be the protector he was supposed to be, to shield us somehow and convince Ruby that Jodi needed the kind of care that we simply weren't equipped to give.
Yeah.
In the end, he never even tried. Shari has some negative...
She got some anger.
She does. She has some negative things to share about her dad as well. You'll notice that she calls both of her parents by their given names.
Yes.
They are Ruby and Kevin to her. But this is the situation. Meanwhile, Kevin is still taking the Men's Connections group that is being led by Jodi,
who is living in his house.
And they're keeping that secret. Nobody knows. So they're finding a way, like Ruby and Jodi will Zoom from different rooms to try to keep this a secret when they're doing their little shows, their videos.
And now she has the actual nerve to start turning the tide. Now everything's Kevin's fault. I'm like, lady, you are living in his house and you were saying it's all his fault.
And he takes it.
And he takes it.
So he's now taking all this criticism from Jodi, and these two youngest siblings who had been misbehaving are also meeting stricter punishments when they act up. For example, the Christmas of 2021, that first Christmas that Jodi was living with them, those two youngest children did not get any gifts, although they were forced to watch their siblings open theirs. And Ruby shares that she had told them that because of their behavior, they were not going to be visited by Santa.
She invited them not to get gifts.
Exactly. She invited them.
She invited them to not participate in Christmas. Chad says, he comments that Ruby and Jodi were best friends. And he says, I remember it being a very fun Christmas. But it was also the Christmas my two youngest siblings didn't get any presents.
Which shows you
the level of normalcy that it is.
Yeah, that the other siblings don't get it. Because you see video clips of Shari and Chad opening stuff and fawning over it, but again, they're also having to play for the camera because this is what we do.
But he's not playing for the camera here. He's telling what he actually thought, and he thought this was really fun. So he was. But oh man, my youngest two didn't get any. But it was a fun Christmas. No,
right. Something else Ruby said in that same video where she was talking about why the kids weren't getting the Christmas. She said something that I think is very revealing because this came up a lot. She said they had been showing long patterns of selfishness, and that even keeping them home from school to wipe the floorboards hadn't brought the pain she hoped for, because this was a recurring theme. She believed that it took pain to cause change. That's going to be important. So about Ruby and Jodi, Kevin said the two were uncomfortably close.
Yeah.
And he suspects that Jodi wanted Ruby to herself. He commented that in order to do that, though, Jodi needed Kevin out of the picture. And she would end up getting him out of the picture by using one of the practices that she very, very frequently advocated. Pretty much every married couple who came to her for help would hear about this wonderful practice of separation. Yeah, but this whole little sequence that we're moving into is going to involve more than just Kevin. Here's how it played out. Chad, who was 17 at this time, went to Jodi one day to confess that he had looked at some inappropriate content and he had also made out with some girls. He says their relationship, she'd been his therapist forever. Their relationship was so close. She's the one he would talk to about sins and different things
he said, I
had
always
done.
felt like I had to confess to her.
Yes.
Like a priest.
Yes.
You know, he's going to her and confessing his sins.
Like she could give him some kind of absolution or something. Yeah, he said he loved her, he trusted her. It was the normal thing to do to go to Jodi with something that he felt guilty about. So she listened to him and told him as part of his repentance, he had to tell his mom. He did. He said he'd never seen Ruby so distraught. She was crying. She was red-faced. She could hardly breathe. And then he said he could watch it. He saw it
the calculations
in her brain when she had suddenly made this realization. She had suddenly decided in her mind that it was Chad's sinful behavior inside their house that was causing all these terrible things that were happening to Jodi.
Never mind that it had been happening before Jodi moved into. That's why she moved into your house.
It's craziness. I know. So Ruby wiped away her tears, Chad said, got serious, and told him it was time that he left their home.
She invited him to leave their home.
Yes, she did.
Sorry, it's ridiculous, so I'm just going to keep hitting that home.
I know. Well, when Kevin came home that day, Chad
Same
was
day.
busily packing.
Mm-hmm.
You saw a video clip of it. Kevin said Ruby was intense. She abruptly told him, our marriage is in serious trouble because of you, Kevin. That's a quote.
Yep.
And then she went on to list these behaviors that he was doing that were the cause of it. She told him he had to leave the house immediately and he could have no contact with her or the children. And Kevin accepted it.
Yeah, she said, you keep holding me and Jodi back.
Wow. He met with every child individually, telling them that he was going away to work on himself so that he could come back and be the dad they deserved.
Gosh.
And watching the docuseries, you see these pictures of him crying and hugging his youngest daughter, whose face is blurred, but who we knew from Kevin was crying too. And I remember watching it. I was like, how do we have pictures of this moment that's happening between this dad and his daughter at this horrific time? And the interviewer actually asks, what was Ruby doing at this time? And Kevin says she was photographing the interaction and smirking. He said it was like she was thinking, oh, this is such good content.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that got me. Kevin not only followed her directive to leave the house and not contact anyone in it, Shari said he even called her to say he'd been invited to leave the house and ask that she not contact him or
even
Chad.
though she's not in the house, she's at college now. He's like, you can't contact me. Nobody can contact me.
Right.
This is the rules.
Yep. Shari and her mom had some short, little tense text exchanges here and there, occasionally have some kind of contact, but Shari did something that really infuriated her mom, and this little spark. Shari found out where Chad was staying, and she went to his apartment to try to talk to him. This is from her book. As she tells it, when she goes and knocks on that door and Chad steps out to speak to her, Chad was so convinced that what his mom and Jodi had him and his dad doing was correct and the right path to take. He told Shari she shouldn't be there. He shut down the conversation, and then he even told Ruby.
He ratted her out.
Yep, that Shari had called Ruby abusive and had contacted him. It resulted in a long text from Ruby that told Shari she was living in deception. It was clear she wanted to disconnect from her family, and if that was the case, well then, maybe she didn't need the familial and financial perks that came with it either. Which, after a few days, Shari was like, uh-oh, does this mean she's going to cut off my money? Like, she has access to my money because, these kids had made some money. They had a bank account. So Shari quickly set about...
It's so smart.
It was. She transferred the money from that account to a new account that was in her name only. And the very next morning, she received a message from the insurance company that told her she had been dropped from her parents' policy and that she needed to get covered immediately so that she didn't get in trouble driving a car. She couldn't drive without this. So now Shari needs some of her documents. She needs her title in order to do this. And she had to go through Ruby's friend, Pam, who was a bigwig in connections, in order to get that because
She's not talking to her.
Ruby wasn't going to let her come get it from her. You'll have to go get it from Pam. Shari sets up a time the following week to go get it from Pam. And in the meantime, two things happened that escalated the situation. One of them was a social media post that Shari made. Somehow the news had gotten out on social media circles that Chad and Kevin had moved out of the home, and according to Shari, Reddit had exploded. She felt like she should respond, so she posted an Instagram story where she confirmed it was true that she was not in contact with her immediate family, and she just kind of in passing commented that she did not support the, quote, extreme beliefs of connections, and went on to say, that she hopes everyone would respect their privacy at this difficult time, and so on.
The generic, yeah.
Yes, that was one thing. The other thing was even more daring in terms of going up against Ruby, having heard that her brothers and sisters had been left alone for 5 days.
Oh, yeah.
While Ruby presumably had gone off to spend time
4 hours away.
Yes, at Jodi's home. Shari had called the Division of Child and Family Services to request a welfare check. We're going to circle back to this more in part 3 and tell you what came of all this, but for now I'm just going to share that somehow Ruby found out who had requested that visit.
Yeah.
Not surprisingly, she was furious. So when it came time to retrieve her documents from Pam a few days later, Shari was very nervous to go alone. She asked a neighbor friend who had basically taken Shari in. This is more than a friend. This is a
She
very
calls
close...
them mom and dad.
Yeah,
at
this is
point.
this is a mom figure. Her first name is Teresa. She speaks in the docuseries. Teresa went with her. And as Shari and Teresa tell it, Ruby was in the house when they arrived. Shari refused to go inside the house. Ruby steps out onto the porch. They had their words there. Basically, Ruby confronted Shari for calling the police on her, told Shari she was a traitor to the family. I think she called her a Judas. And I'm summarizing, I'm paraphrasing, but basically Ruby wanted no more to do with her until she was ready to apologize. And she again warned her not to contact Kevin or Chad or the other.
And now this Teresa's hearing this.
Yeah, she said she was crying. She said Shari was crying and pleading, shaking. She said she herself had tears rolling down her face, and Ruby had no emotion at all.
Miss cries all the time, wasn't crying a bit.
Not a bit. In fact, as Teresa shared it, Ruby stood there, stone-faced, giving off waves of animosity. And this is, again, her perspective, but Teresa said she realized Ruby had come to see evil in everyone around her, and now the only people still around her were those 4 young children trapped in the house with her. Shari echoed that same thought, saying that she realized when she left that conversation, she was disowned from her family, but her primary concern was the kids who were still stuck in that house with Ruby. And I'm going to wrap up this part with this one last quote. This is from Shari's book, talking about this relationship between Ruby and Jodi and what she felt like it meant to her siblings. She said, "Our family's very own cult leader, a false prophet who swept into our lives like a hurricane, turning my mother into a fawning, starstruck acolyte who lapped up every demented word like it was holy water. My father, once our anchor, had been banished, leaving Ruby and Jodi to rule unchallenged over my 4 youngest siblings who were still there with them." And that's where we leave off.
I know.
When we come back, we're going to talk about, obviously, what happened after this. But, that leads us into our armchair. Before I do, as I did in part 1, I want to take just a second to share with you the child abuse hotline. Reading from their blurb. If you suspect child abuse, call the Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline at 1-800-4-A-CHILD or 1-800-422-4453 or go to www.childhelp.org. All calls are toll-free and confidential. The hotline is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in more than 170 languages.
Armchair Psychologist.
For our armchair, last time we discussed Ruby. This time I thought I would ask you to share your opinions about Jodi, and I'm going to weigh in too. So just based on what we've discussed so far, what are your thoughts?
It's so hard to weigh in at this point because I know what's coming.
I know,
Based on what we know about her right now, with hindsight, I know that she is a cult leader. What would I think about her if this is all I knew? I would think that she was a desperately needy person. I would think that she had issues with control as well. I would think that she was a bad influence. I would see, I guess I'm trying to look at it as if I was in their circle, if I was their neighbor and I saw this woman, I would see red flags everywhere. Now, I wouldn't see what's coming because nobody, clearly the neighbors even say later, nobody saw what was actually coming.
Right.
You just think,
You're concerned.
You're
There are
concerned.
things
This
that
is
concern
nuts.
you.
I feel like
Yeah.
she's ran off the husband. I feel like she's doing stuff that she shouldn't be doing.
She's leaving the kids alone. You know?
Yeah, all of this is bad. But I feel like her in relation to Ruby, I agree with Shari. A lot of people later will blame Jodi for what Ruby became. I think Ruby was already that person and Jodi gave her permission to be that person. So I think we're seeing the nuggets of what is going to happen. And I don't think the blame lies solely with Jodi about what gets ready to happen. So help me out here because I'm not able to separate what's getting ready to happen. What do you think about her at this point? Help me formulate this.
Again, opinions. I have absolutely no respect for Jodi.
Yeah.
I have a hard time not becoming very, very critical because I think this is a woman who knows how to manipulate and use her power and take some principles that do work and then twist them and turn them into things that are very, very bad. I think what really came to my mind as I was thinking this through just a second ago was Jodi is idolized by so many people.
Yeah.
Like she's on a pedestal. We've already said that. What was it about the two of these women coming together that seemed to set them both off? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, are they two sides of the same coin? Like, what is it that both of them just fed each other's deepest flaws?
Yeah. I guess it can be, you can have it for, okay, let's say friendships can be for good or bad. You and I, we have different opinions. We're able to say the different opinions and still respect and love each other and we complement each other. We're not the same, but we have enough similarities that we get along and we're friends. We've been friends long term.
Right.
Yeah, sure. That's normal friendship. With the two of them, I feel like it was the evil side of that, where you've got almost these two supervillains that are just looking for the other half. Well, I have the influence and the money. You have the power. And then when we come together, it's just this supernova burning hot of just all this. I don't know any other way to say it than just rottenness and evilness.
Power
Hungry people.
Yes.
Narcissism,
And
manipulation.
nobody is stopping them.
And no checks.
There's no checks. Absolutely. I think they fed each other's worst needs and worst habits or beliefs. It just escalated everything exponentially.
There's also, I don't want to talk about their physical appearance in a negative way, just something that I noticed. As Ruby became more unhinged, I noticed that her physical appearance became a little more disheveled, a little more. There's one time where she's driving in the car, she's got a bob haircut, and it is just not combed. She's just looking a little bit more like her insides are starting to leak out of her outsides, if that makes sense. Like who she is on the inside is starting to come out in her appearance too.
Well, and I wonder if part of that was they were absolutely convinced we're now in the end days.
True.
So it's not so much about my audience and putting on my perfect little family, my perfect little show.
I'm trying to save lives.
We are now two supremely important beings doing God's work on God's mission to try to save as many people as we can because, we think the world is ending and we need to take care of our business. It's also been brought up that these two, as Kevin said, seem uncomfortably close.
Yeah.
Is there, a relationship aspect happening that also is affecting all of this? All I know is I think, I hate to make broad sweeping generalizations, but two of the things that concern me the most are how, as they're caught up in their own power and their own beliefs of their superiority and their importance, that they have so little care and compassion about people that they ought to love deeply.
That are in their charge.
Yes, that are in their charge, that they're responsible for. That, like, these are their closest, in Ruby's case, her closest family, her closest relatives, her closest blood. And like, there seems to be so little compassion. It really seems to be so much about them, and also so little awareness. I don't think they see any of it. Like,
No.
anytime there's criticism or anything that's brought against them, I don't see that either of them sees it, acknowledges it.
They can't be wrong.
Right, they cannot be wrong. Cannot be. Which makes for a really hard cheers.
It does.
Actually, who are we gonna cheers?
Okay, let's go for Shari this time. Let's go for Shari, who got out, seems to be the first person in the family that saw the truth.
She
kept
did. She saw it
trying
early.
to say, please listen to me. Please please understand this woman is not good for our family. So let's raise a glass. Let's cheers Shari. I think she was the hero of this episode.
Absolutely. Cheers.
Cheers.
If you love what we do, please rate and review our show or become a supporter through Buy Me a Coffee or Patreon. Whether a single gift or recurring monthly donation, your support is what allows us to keep the tea brewing.
Subscribe on your favorite podcast app or the Scandal Water Podcast YouTube channel, and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Show notes are available at our website, scandalwaterpodcast.com, where you can also access the merch store and more.
This episode was executive produced by Candy Thomas, that's me, and Ashley Raymer Brown.
That's me.
It was researched and written by Candy Thomas and edited by Ashley Raymer Brown.
A special thank you to Josh Martin, who wrote, composed, and performed the Scandal Water theme and other music. Matt C. Adams, who created the artwork, and Joshua Reeve, who designed our website and provides ongoing technical support.
As a reminder, this podcast is purely for entertainment purposes. The thoughts and opinions of the host during each episode of Scandal Water are their own and do not reflect the opinions of any future guests, advertisers, or clearly professional psychologists. Thanks for listening.